Welcome to the Shipyards in North Vancouver, the site of today's new mobility forum, sponsored and organized by TransLink, by the Vancouver Entrepreneurs Forum, and by Invest in Vancouver. It was a really exciting session today because got to hear from many different players that are really pushing the envelope in the mobility space, particularly focused on public transit. Since 2018, Oslo has deployed autonomous transportation vehicles. That's the kind of vehicle, not necessarily a bus that has a fixed route, but rather vehicles that come to you on demand and take you where you need to go. As their saying goes, take fixed routes public transit when you can, but when you need, you'll know that you have access to this extra level of service to take you where you need to be in a single ridership mode. Mind you, we're talking about jurisdictions with all the right policies and the right infrastructure and market to enable this kind of technology for mass deployment. But it goes to show that already there are success stories about there talking about autonomous vehicles. So it was really interesting to see how they're approaching it and what the market in Oslo, in Norway, is thinking about this new technology. They see it as competition to private vehicles. And why would that be a bad thing? That's their position. Because now they're offering an alternative to private vehicle ownership. Instead of spending all the money and insurance and maintenance and risk in operating your own vehicle, you just get your app and call a vehicle on demand to work for you. So it's actually beneficial for the consumers and the city in general because you're lowering emissions, you're lowering pollution, and you are reducing costs because now there's more competition in the marketplace. So overall, it was really insightful to hear how Oslo is incorporating autonomous vehicles in their transportation network. And that's really their future. Like they're banking on this 100% of the way. They really want to scale up mass adoption of autonomous vehicles in their public transit fleet. The second session was about big data. So we had Microsoft, we have transit agencies talking about how they're starting to leverage big data and AI and all these fancy buzzwords that you hear around all the time now. They put it in more concrete terms. Right now, perhaps AI is not AI, the big machine that's going to conquer all, but rather workflow automation. And that's a very important distinction to make because that helps ground it in viable business models. Talking about big data, the message was very clear and very simple. Start small, but start now. Leverage the existing local tools that are available from different suppliers and vendors to start small, but start getting experience into how you can leverage your existing data and analyze it at scale. Some of the feedback that we got in the session was like many transit authorities still cannot tell you exactly their ridership on a given moment or a given day. That speaks volumes about the lack of integration in their different data silos. And that was the message there is you have all these data silos. How can you extract intelligence and business value out of each of these data sets? And again, you don't have to know it all in big data science. Rather, leverage the low-code tools that are out there. What does that mean? It means that, Microsoft was there talking about their data low-code management tools, but all the other vendors would have the same. But the point is the same. You can start taking these packages and train it with your data so that you can have your own customized data model, and from which you can start then taking out valuable information. What's really cool. The other thing about big data that they were talking about is how many projects in big data fail. And they fail because they are not people-centric. What they were meaning by that is that many of these projects, they get carried away on the data just by itself. But instead of saying, how is that going to solve a problem for my people, for my operators, for my employees, for my customers? How can I actually improve ridership? How can I improve the customer experience? Instead, they were focusing on, I have all this data, what can I do with it? Let's run a whole bunch of algorithms and let's pray for the best without a well-defined outcome at the beginning of the data exercise. So that's the recommendation. Be people-centric and start with your right scale. And lastly, Just as importantly, cybersecurity. We heard very clearly that with the advent of these AI tools, cybersecurity risks are only going to get bigger. They're not going to get smaller. So now's the time to invest in a solid infrastructure network that takes cybersecurity into account. I'm talking about this big plan now. I'm talking about EVs and this whole transformation in general. This whole transformation of our transportation sector is really pinned on the digital transformation. Because long gone are the days where spreadsheets could hold your operations together. It's just too much data right now, and it's just too much for someone, an operator or your manager or your teams to handle effectively. So you're also thinking about upgrading your HR systems, your ERP systems, like so many systems that now have to be incorporated into one unified strategy. And that's the point of doing this unification and this road mapping, is to enable you to leverage the scale of your business so that you can negotiate better prices from the vendors that can provide the right tools for your business, while at the same time ensuring that you have the right level of compartmentalization so that cybersecurity risks are minimized. You know, I've seen this digital transformation discussion since my industrial automation days, and it's the same message. You have to design based on best practices. So have your layered approach towards security, and also think about the physical, the procedural, and the digital layers of your security protocols. But cybersecurity, like they said, it's an issue, you have to stay on top of it. There's no other way around it, because the alternative is to not embark on your digital transformation. And that most likely mean more headaches and more issues down the road. Because it's inevitable, just because the positive outcomes are way bigger than these challenges that need to be addressed. The other panel that was really engaging was the bus of the future. It was really engaging because they got to talk about, they can be semi-autonomous or autonomous. They can be electric or, well, have different powertrains, but they can charge at this rate or that rate, or they can charge with pantographs or wireless charging, or they can have all these data collection systems to enable this big data interoperability. But then something really cool happened in the room where someone asked the question, so how do you actually get this going if your HR or your management or your bureaucracy in general is not yet up to speed? There was a bit of a silence in the room. And that's the point that the panel drove home. So the bosses are way advanced already. They're really out there. It's the bureaucracy that needs to catch up. It's the policies that enable transit authorities to evaluate and pilot and then deploy these new technologies at scales that are way behind. So the call to action here was very clear. Update your bureaucracies. Allow your jurisdictions and your transit authorities to fail fast, to learn via these incremental iterative pilot projects so that they can learn the lessons that they need to scale up effectively and reliably, and more importantly, safely for your operations and for your ridership. So again, bringing all these points together, we're talking about big data, we're talking about the electrification of the infrastructure, we're talking about all these budget challenges that are affecting, all the transit authorities everywhere. But it all boils down to, by thinking holistically about your network, you can leverage significant cost savings while preserving, and even better, improving your customer experience, your ridership, and your frequency of operation. And it is all really important to help transit authorities do more with existing budgets they have, because we need to leverage public transit. I mean, I've been an advocate of electric vehicles since 2010, when I did my capstone project at UBC on where to locate level 2 charging stations across Vancouver. But I know for a fact that just retail personal passenger vehicles are not the answer we need. One of the comments that we heard from the mayor of North Vancouver, repeated by the representatives from Oslo in Norway, is that emissions from the transportation sector are roughly between 40 and 60% of the jurisdiction's total emissions. And yet, only 4% of that comes from public transit. And with public transit, you have additional benefits for the economy from your citizenship. So it really makes sense to invest in public transit so that people, and in the words of Oslo, I love that saying, sustainable freedom of movement. The last panel was on green growth and what are the barriers and opportunities to enable green growth. Policy, productivity, and talent. Three key gaps that jurisdictions, municipalities, states, provinces, universities, you name it, all organizations need to tackle right on. And they're all related because productivity, policy, and talent all go back to how you empower your human capital to do more with what they have. In the case of talent, the big challenge, at least here in the Vancouver region, is, well, cost of living. It's no surprise that cost of living here in Vancouver, it's way out of whack. So how can you attract and retain talent to the region? Well, you have to invest in the region. So that's why municipalities, Invest Vancouver, the province, the federal government is in trying to do their best to create these talent generation programs through the universities, through the colleges, BCIT, university, etc. Same in your jurisdiction. But the message there was also clear. Industry needs to pull their weight as well. Industry needs to invest in talent development. They cannot just count on government to build the next generation, train the next generation of managers and specialists and technical advisors to their operations. They need to generate a workflow so that people come through their ranks ready to take on the next challenges within their organizations. Something really stuck with me on this point is, you have these big governments, high-level governments giving all these mandates to the market. You have to sell so many clean cars by that date or so date, and you need to have this many chargers. And that's great to have those mandates, but how does that translate at the operational level, at the execution level? Who's going to be responsible for delivering that target? There's a gap there. And that's what policymakers need to be aware of so that they can better allocate responsibilities at each level of the value and supply chain to ensure that those targets are hit and met by the industry. So overall, many different topics that are all consequential for the transformation of our transportation infrastructure and for the betterment of our cities and our regions in regards with leveraging public transit. Public transit is necessary to reduce emissions. Public transit is necessary to empower the lives of everybody that may not or choose not to or cannot drive on their own or choose to not to because, something, I'm from Venezuela and we back home we have a saying that, a country is rich not when everybody's driving their own car, but when the rich people take public transit. So that's what I want to leave you with. Let's empower everybody to take advantage of public transit to live their best lives sustainably with freedom of movement. And for this, thanks again to TransLink, to the Vancouver Entrepreneur Forum, and to Invest Vancouver for putting together this session. See you next time.